Hi everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. The AARP, which is the American Association of Retired Persons, spent years of research trying to find a character flaw or a universal common denominator that made people susceptible to fraud. They finally found something, but it's not what you would expect. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'll explain 4 factors that make us fall for sociopathic scams. At the end of my presentation, I'll answer your questions. So to join the chat or ask a question, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, when I finally realized that my ex-husband was a complete con artist and I had been thoroughly duped, the person I was most angry with was myself. I'm intelligent, educated, responsible, and self-sufficient. So why did I waste $227,000 of my hard-earned money on his so-called business plans? Most of them, it turned out, involved trysts with other women. So why did I fall for the scam? I'm certainly not alone in asking these questions. In 2021, according to the Federal Trade Commission, American consumers lost a record $547 million in romance scams. This was a jump of nearly 80% over 2020. In fact, they said that losses to romance scams over the last 5 years totaled $1.3 billion. Now, you may think that only senior citizens lose money to romance scams, but that's not the case. From 2017 to 2021, people aged 18 to 29 lost money in romance scams at a 10-fold increase. The median loss for these youngsters was $750. However, for older people, the losses were greater. Those aged 70 and above lost $9,000. So, how does this happen? Are there personality traits or characteristics that make people fall for financial fraud? The AARP researched this question for years. They hoped to find a character flaw unique to fraud victims. Then they wanted to tell the world about the flaw, warning people so that potential targets would know to be on their guard. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. 2 decades later, the researchers finally reached a conclusion. There is no universal character flaw that makes people susceptible to fraud. They found out that it doesn't matter who you are. What does matter is how you are when the sociopath tries to snag you, your circumstances, and your emotional state. Now, much of the previous fraud research focused on cognitive factors. Did the people who fall for scams not have the intellectual ability to see that something was too good to be true? Were they lacking in financial literacy? No and no. It turned out that intelligence was not a determining factor. Plenty of educated, intelligent people fall for scams, like me. The AARP surveyed people who had lost money in financial fraud and compared their responses to people who had not lost money. And that's where they found the answer. The analysis identified 4 factors that best predicted losing money to scams. Here's what they are. Number 1, stressful life events. Fraud victims experienced twice as many stressful life events as non-victims, such as the death of a family member, loss of a job, or feeling lonely, during the time that they encountered the fraud. Number 2, less social or family support. fraud victims reported significantly less family support and closeness than non-victims. Number 3, stronger emotions. Victims reported far stronger emotional responses during the fraud encounters than non-victims. These could be either positive or negative emotions and led the victims to feeling out of control. And finally, number 4, targeted by scammers. On average, fraud victims reported 60% more fraud encounters than non-victims. So, how did the researchers figure this out? Well, the first clues came from the scammers themselves. In prior research, AARP interviewed convicted fraudsters about their strategies. The goal, the scammers always said, is to put the target under the ether, meaning in a heightened emotional state. Under the ether, that's the actual term that con artists use. Veteran scammers know that if the target of the fraud is in a heightened emotional state, like fear or excitement, they are much easier to manipulate. Why? Because they're less likely to be thinking rationally. Instead, they are reacting emotionally. During these times, it may not matter how much education or financial literacy you have. The cognitive part of your brain is offline, and your emotions are being manipulated. Con artists, therefore, intentionally try to get you worked up. Interestingly, it doesn't matter whether the emotions are positive or negative, as long as they are strong. Are you excited about all the attention that you're receiving from a new love interest? That will make you fall for the scam. Are you afraid that you're going to lose a relationship, your job, or your house? That works too. Not only do victims report significantly more and stronger emotions at the time of the fraud encounters, but they report feeling out of control. This is precisely what the scammer wants. The research also found that stressful life events, such as an illness, death of a loved one, or loss of a job, all increase the chances that someone would fall for a scam. Scammers know this too. So when they're talking to you, they intentionally probe for weaknesses. Are you recently widowed or divorced? Suffering from an illness? Worried about finances? And then there's loneliness, which is a key vulnerability. The AARP study found that fraud victims were more than twice as likely to report feeling lonely than non-victims. The AARP research focused specifically on victims of financial fraud, but as everyone at Lovefraud well knows, sociopathic con artists scam us out of more than just money. They may want a place to live. They may want services such as childcare or housekeeping. They may want us to support their business plans. They may want sex. Whatever they want, they use the same strategies as the financial fraudsters. They probe for our weaknesses and then put us under the ether. Therefore, to protect ourselves from falling for con artists and other sociopaths, we need to understand that stress and emotional arousal make us more vulnerable. If we're feeling out of control, we should be aware that this is not the time to be making important or expensive decisions. So, let's take a look. Looks like we have a few comments here. See if there's some questions. Okay, so Core writes, once a victim, always a victim. I'm not sure that I totally agree with that, although there is some truth to it. because that's one of the things. I mean, what happens is if somebody gets scammed, essentially what happens is scammers share their mailing lists. And so if you fall for a scam at one point, they put you on the list, and before you know it, you keep getting all these people, trying to convince you that you owe money to the IRS, or that you didn't pay a bill on time, and you're going to your account's going to get shut down. All these different things. So what happens is the scammers communicate. They've got these blacklists out someplace that they share among themselves or sell to each other, and you get on one of these lists, and then all of a sudden you've got these calls coming in, and emails, and text messages, and everything else. So that part is definitely true. However, I think it's possible to learn from your mistakes. I certainly did. Once I figured out exactly what had happened, I learned. There had actually been a previous scam earlier, although that guy, I really should have seen that one coming. It was pretty obvious. But you definitely can learn to recognize this behavior, and that's the whole point. That's the whole point of everything that I'm doing here at Lovefraud, is to educate you so that you can be aware and you can see it coming. When you start to get these instincts that, gee, that doesn't sound right, or my goodness, this person's pushing awful hard, or maybe I shouldn't even answer the phone, that you understand what the possibilities are and what sociopaths do and what they're capable of, so that when you start to get an internal warning that something is off, you pay attention. So I definitely think that it's possible to learn. Many of us learn the hard way, and unfortunately those are the most memorable lessons, but it's definitely possible to overcome the experience of being a victim. Okay, so Bandana Sharma says, it's like a social network emotional support poverty state. A social network emotional support equals real wealth. Okay, lucky for me, when I was in a heightened emotional state, I'm very angry and vicious. LOL. Okay. I definitely attracted predators in that state after a divorce, but lured them to unleash it on them. Cathartic. Well, okay. So, yeah. Emotional stability, social stability, all that helps. I've found in many, many cases that one of the key reasons, which was cited in the AARP research, of why people fall for scams and getting involved with a sociopath in any level is essentially falling for a scam. But loneliness is definitely a key factor, and anyone who's feeling lonely, and I've said this in a lot of seminars, if you're feeling lonely, it's like you're walking around with a big bullseye on your forehead. So if you're feeling lonely, which can happen to a lot of people in a lot of circumstances, you just need to be aware that loneliness is a key vulnerability. Sociopaths are very aware that loneliness is something that makes people vulnerable. They see somebody who's lonely, it's like putting up a neon sign saying, "Here I am, come get me." So you need to be aware that if you're feeling lonely, that you are at risk, and you need to be especially cautious about what you respond to. And that's actually one of the problems, a big problem with online dating, because if you're putting up a profile on any dating site, you're broadcasting the fact that you're lonely. And that's why there's so many sociopaths who are, plowing through the dating sites, looking for people to take advantage of, because they know that simply by the fact that you're out there looking, that it signifies a vulnerability right there. So that's something that folks who get involved with dating sites really need to be aware of, that you're broadcasting your vulnerability simply by being present. Okay. So Echo says, if you become aware of your weaknesses, you can work on them and protect yourself from predators. Absolutely. That's exactly the point. Okay. So Joe says, thanks, Donna, for your educational videos. Now I know about cluster B disorders. I'm so much more aware and recognize and act on the red flags, see patterns of behavior. Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. That makes my day. That's absolutely why Lovefraud is here, is to help you become aware that there are millions of people out there who are disordered, and that there are warning signs. And once you know what the warning signs are, they're actually fairly easy to spot. So I'm glad you're educating yourself, and it's making you feel more comfortable. Okay, so Hawaii says, hi, Donna. I've attracted predators because of my mental health and being too nice. What you want to look at is, why is it that you're too nice? Okay. Being nice is wonderful, but we definitely want to be nice with awareness, and awareness of the fact that not everybody has good intentions, and we really need to be aware of that and be able to spot people who may not have good intentions. So I would suggest that you take a look at why you feel you're too nice. And one of the things to look at, and I have absolutely no idea if this is the case with you, but a lot of people who had disordered parents learn as a survival mechanism to cater to the parents and to put the parents first. It's a survival mechanism, because they never know when the parent is going to fly off the handle or get aggressive or maybe even violent or something like that, or be critical or demeaning. And so people who grow up in these situations learn to be very sensitive to other people's moods, and actually take on the attitude that they are responsible for other people's moods and happiness. So again, I have absolutely no idea if this is your situation, but if it is, you might want to take a look at that and realize that there might be a reason why you feel like you're too nice. And as I said, being nice is fabulous, but we also need to be able to evaluate when somebody deserves our niceness and our kindness and our willingness to be helpful. So that's what setting boundaries is all about. It's about knowing when to say yes and when to say no, thank you. Okay, so Core says, so how to leave the vicious circle of being lonely? Okay. Usually people feel lonely or because if there is no partner, or if there's a partner that's not in a satisfying relationship. That's a prime reason. The idea is to have, start to break out of that situation by making friends, by having some kind of a social life, preferably not one that's online. because that's like living in an alternate universe. I mean, you need to be able to be with people and to communicate with people and to talk with people face to face or in the same physical place. I mean, online is a really poor substitute. So what I would suggest is that you figure out what some of your interests may be, and then try to find people who have similar interests. If you like gardening, you like music, you like movies, anything at all, anything that you like. I mean, that's one approach. Another approach, which is kind of related, is to educate yourself. Of course, now a lot of classes are online too, but if you can find some places where, I mean, even if you're just going to a one-day workshop or something like that. I mean, the idea is to broaden your social connections in any way that you can. And other things you can do, I mean, this might sound kind of silly, but it works. Dogs are great. And people who have dogs for the most part tend to be friendly, and especially if you live in an area where there are people close by, you're out walking the dog, you get to meet people, you talk to people. I mean, the first step is to have any kind of contact at all. And then as you increase the number of people that you are at least friendly with, perhaps you'll find the opportunity to develop stronger friendships. And if you're also, looking for a romantic partner, maybe you'll come across someone who qualifies for that. It requires effort, and it requires allowing yourself to make yourself just a little bit vulnerable, in that, you do have to put yourself out there. That's the only way to overcome it. So, you do it in whatever way is comfortable for you. Someone says, once you see through everyone's mask, what is left? Well, not everyone has a mask. I mean, we all have a mask to a certain extent, but there are real people out there. There are people who are authentic. There are people who are capable of true friendship and can be caring. And that's what you're looking for. So hopefully, if you see through the mask, in some cases, that's what you see. You see an authentic person. And, there's plenty of them in the world, and it's just a matter of finding them. I mean, one of the things, we talk so much about the sociopaths, and I always say that, there's millions of them among us, which there are. It's approximately 20% of about 12% of the population probably have a cluster B personality disorder, which is about 30 million adults in the United States. But 12% who are disordered still means that 88% are not disordered. So there's plenty of people out there who are good and authentic and caring, and it's just a matter of deciding that those are the types of people that you want in your life. And another important thing is and this is always the answer. Always, always, always the answer. The thing that you can do is to work on your internal healing. I mean, we all have wounds. We all have disappointments. We've all experienced betrayals. Somehow we have to overcome them. We have to get them out of our system. And the more you can do that, the more you'll be able to be open to the type of people that you really want in your life. Okay, well, that looks like all the questions that we have for today. So once again, thank you for joining me today for Lovefraud Live. We will be continuing every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. I took a couple months off. It was great. Had some vacation, had a great time. And so we're ready to get going. So thank you again for joining me today, and we'll see you next week for the next episode of Lovefraud Live. Good night.